Hey everybody, hope you can hear me okay. It's time for Secret Spaces, July 26th, 2022 edition. We're going to get everybody up on stage this week. We've got a ton of our friends from around the privacy space of Web3 joining us. Let me add some of them as speakers. We'll kick off momentarily as we get them up here. Let me see if I can find everybody, or maybe Patrick, you can try to find everybody that we've invited to join us here today out in the crowd. We'll invite them up here on stage. We'll get the announcements out.
Yep, adding them up now.
Wonderful. We usually kick off the content around 5 minutes after the hours to give people a little bit of time to file in. So just hang out with us for just a moment. We're going to get everybody up here. Please do us a great favor and go and share the link to this spaces within your communities. If you're a privacy passionate person, you hang out with other privacy passionate people, this is probably going to be a real good talk. You may or may not know some of the projects that are joining us up on stage today. This may or may not be your first Secret Spaces. Either way, we're excited to feature a lot of these projects that are doing incredible work in the privacy space of Web3, which is still, after all these years, pretty underdeveloped. But we're trying to change that. So please share this link around. Let's see if we can pack the room here. We're recording this as well, so all these insights won't be lost to time, but they're always better live. Patrick, we have a badge today, don't we?
We do, yeah.
Every Secret Spaces, we allow people listening to the space to claim a secret NFT, a free to mint secret NFT. We call them secret badges. Today is no exception. Is that tweet already out? Can you pin it to the space, Patrick?
Yeah, the tweet is out. 1 sec,
Cool.
I'll pin
So
that
for
right now.
those of you who have not claimed a secret badge before, they're private by default NFTs. They prove that you attended today's Secret Spaces, but it's not revealed on chain. So definitely look into secret badges, secret NFTs more in general. That's just some of what privacy can unlock for everybody. But if you're attending today, make sure to claim yours. Patrick's going to pin the tweet that'll tell you exactly how to do it. I'll share the claim code pretty soon, which you can type in and just check it out. But yeah, would love to have any of you who haven't yet experimented with secret NFTs, go ahead, claim your private by default NFT to prove you were here without showing it off to everybody, only the people you trust, only the people you want to. We'll get a lot more into that private by default approach to the space as we go. I think pretty much everybody who's going to join us on stage has some very helpful thoughts on what privacy by default could do for Web3. Cool. That tweet is now pinned. I think we've got a lot of people coming up here already as expected.
Waiting on one more
person. Got it. I just tried to invite Nico up here. Kenny's up here. Michelle is up here. Alan is up here. And we're waiting. We're trying to get Pseudo up here, right?
Yep.
Got it. Well, we'll get started, and definitely we'll make sure that people keep filling in here. So let's get started. It is Secret Spaces, resetting the space. It is the July 26th edition. We do this every week. This week, special privacy edition, we've invited a bunch of great projects from around the space to join us here on stage to talk through privacy for a high level to start, and then specifically what their projects are doing to contribute. You've seen us feature projects within the secret ecosystem before. You've seen us feature people from around the Cosmos ecosystem before. This is something we want to start doing a lot more regularly, is showing just how many other people are thinking about the privacy problem, contributing solutions, and how we can start working more closely together just to make sure that this becomes a dominant narrative going forward in the crypto space, something we all have to care about if we want to drive global adoption. We can't wait till it's too late. So I'm Tor. I'm from Secret Foundation. Patrick's up here on stage as well from Secret Foundation. We're one of the many entities helping grow the secret network ecosystem. We won't spend a lot of time on us. Instead, I'll hand it over one by one to the people who are joining us from around the ecosystem. I'll ask them to give quick 30-second introductions each, because they'll have plenty of time to talk about their projects later. Do a quick personal intro and a quick project info introduction. We'll start with who's on stage while I go look for Pseudo in the audience. But I'll just call on people one by one from people who are already up here. Let's start with Alan. A personal intro and which project you're joining from.
Yeah, so I am Alan. Many people in the Railgun down on me as Railalujah Churchgoer. I'm one of the co-founders of the Railgun Privacy Project. Been in crypto, I guess, since about 2017. And at Railgun, we're building privacy preserving zero knowledge smart contract for wallet side privacy. Currently deployed V1 contracts for Ethereum, Polygon, and BSC. That's my quick intro.
Perfect. All right, let's pass it to Nico.
Yeah, hi, my name is Nico. I've been in crypto/security since 2016 or so. And I'm here today representing Elusiv Privacy, which is a next generation privacy protocol in Solana that easily allows wallets and dApps to easily integrate private solutions into what they already have.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Now we'll pass it to Kenny.
Hi, everyone. My name's Kenny, and I'm one of the co-founders of Manta Network. We are a zero-knowledge proof-focused on-chain privacy project, building first in the Polkadot ecosystem for private on-chain transactions, as well as privacy-preserving smart contracts.
Phenomenal. The only person that we invited up here who's currently missing, and we are looking for, I think they have to join from mobile, will be joined by Pseudonym, who's joining from NIM, which is also a privacy project within the Cosmos universe. So excited to get Pseudonym up here as well so they can do their own self-introduction. Till we get there, I think we can dive into a couple of these questions.
Oh, hold on. Hang on.
Oh, shoot.
This
I'm
is me
so
too,
sorry,
Michelle.
Michelle. I'm so sorry. That is
No worries.
totally my fault. Michelle, you get an extra 30 seconds in addition to your original 30 seconds.
I don't need an extra 30 seconds. Thanks a lot. I'm super private. That's why you didn't even think about
I'm
me.
sorry. Please.
That's my little trick. I'm currently not officially affiliated with any organization, but I was on the inaugural Zcash Open Major Grant Committee, where we not only contributed towards Zcash-based products, we also gave $1 million grant to the Tor Foundation. And I currently advise a privacy protocol called Light on Solana. But generally, I'm super interested in the privacy space. I just did a 3-hour workshop at hope.net on privacy, plausible deniability privacy in crypto. And also, personally, what I want to help drive forward is the narrative aspect of what we're trying to do, because I think that will underscore a lot of the other efforts that we make as we kind of push back against an increasingly surveillance kind of environment.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly why we're here. We're trying to help strengthen the narrative. We're trying to help push this conversation forward because yes, if we don't do it, a lot of what gets built in the crypto space is not what the space needs. It's what's kind of convenient to build or immediately profitable to build. And there's not as much thought to privacy and sustainability as there could be. So pretty much everybody that you're seeing here on stage is somebody who's thinking very long term and very much practically about what do we actually want to see built into these decentralized technologies. Like we really want to make sure that privacy gets built intentionally and certainly not as an afterthought. So let's dive into the content. We're still trying to get our last guest up here on stage. Let's pick up where Michelle left us off then. Let's talk about this narrative, right? I have a few high-level questions set up before we go project specific. So let's talk about the first one that I have here, which is why does privacy matter, period? Why does it need to be a narrative? And then in your answer for each of you, just kind of give us a sense. Do you think this is something that is improving, like understanding of this problem and also solutions to this problem? Or do you think it's something that's actually getting worse and we should be really concerned that things seem to be not improving when they desperately need to be getting better? Let's see. I'll hand this one straight back to Michelle. I think that's a good place to start, and then we'll work through everybody else.
Cool. I don't know if we can say definitively if it's getting better or worse, because I think the overall system has become more surveillance driven. At the same time, it's also woken up people to what's happening, and so I think we're starting to see people try and fight back. There's a saying that some of us can't have privacy if all of us don't have privacy. right? We talk about shielded pools and mixed nets. If you're the only people transacting there, then it doesn't provide enough privacy. So I think the jury is still out, but I think it's extremely important for projects like ourselves not to just push the technology and how great it is, but also to push the narrative so that while on the one hand, companies in the middle are being pushed by companies or projects in the middle are being pushed by agencies on the right. On the left, they need to also be pushed back by consumers who care about the long-term trend of what's happening.
Great. What about our other panelist guests here? Who else has a thought on this issue? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And why does it matter at all? Right.
Yeah, I'll kind of chime in here. So when it comes to privacy, I think about it really pragmatically, right? I think that individuals really want to have privacy. I just don't think they realize that they have it in a the traditional rails that exist for finance. So whenever I go to like let's say a Starbucks or a bakery or something like this, I swipe my debit card. I definitely want them to know that I can take and pay for my latte or my coffee or whatever it is. But I don't want them to have access to my bank records, nor do I want them to be able to like track me into the future, right? And that's kind of the situation we have in public ledgers today, right? So when we talk about like public ledger spaces like Ethereum, Polygon, list goes on, right? We have that issue where if I do a transaction with another party, they have viewing rights to the future of that wallet, and that's a big issue. And so if we think that like crypto is going to be like the future of finance and it's going to take over traditional rails and everyone's going to go into different stores with their crypto card or whatever it looks like, maybe it's a tap to pay with a phone, who knows, right? We have to have some semblance of privacy just from an individual level. But if we kind of, expand that out into like institutions, right, trading especially, we kind of saw what happened over the last 2 months in this last debacle of, down only. We were watching people, being called out for specific liquidation points and things like this. And this is very difficult to deal with when you're an institution trying to maintain margin if someone knows exactly where you are in the space, right? It's also really difficult for alpha, right? If you're developing a trading strategy, perhaps a specific farming strategy or a new shitcoin that you really like and you're trying to accumulate and you don't want somebody to know about it, it's going to be really difficult to do in a public ledger space. And it's only getting more difficult as people like Nansen, Chainalysis apply more and more sophisticated AI against the blockchain. And so, we basically have like this arms race in between people like us on this chat here today, developing privacy tech to allow people to have the privacy they need in order for, in my eyes, crypto to be successful. And sort of, the counter to that, which is like on-chain analytics companies taking and de-anonymizing everything in the blockchain. And I think as adoption gets greater and greater, their de-anonymization, if you will, of the blockchain only gets easier. And so it's, I think Tori, you're right. It's definitely something that needs to happen, rather immediately. And is it? That's a good question. I guess, is it getting better? I don't know that it is getting better immediately, but I would definitely say that it's getting a lot more attention now, especially as people start to realize that they're conflating, the pseudonymous nature of an address with privacy and anonymity. People are starting to realize that they just don't have privacy and are looking for options to preserve that. So, I think we're on the way, but it's definitely just getting started.
Yeah. No, we're talking about three things, right? Like whether people are actually becoming more aware whether it's a problem, and even if they are, if we're getting any closer to solving this for people in Web 2 or Web 3. I'm breaking in quickly to share the claim code since we're 15 minutes in. Thanks everybody for listening to this point. The pinned tweet tells you how to claim your secret NFT badge for attending today's space, for which we are all very grateful. If you want to prove that you were here, but not prove it to everybody public on chain, be able to prove it privately when needed, and see your badge for yourself and decrypt the private metadata, the claim code today is I love privacy, all caps, all one word, because we all up here on stage do love privacy. The claim code is I love privacy. Thanks everybody for listening to this point. So Nico and Kenny, your answers, I guess, I'm merging our first two questions here since there's so much to say. My other question for the first one was, why does my privacy matter specifically in Web3, which I think Alan is already speaking to. So let's get your answers to that. And then after you've both had a chance to kind of remark on it, we do finally have Pseudonym here as well, who I'm adding to the stage. And then Pseudonym will be able to introduce themselves as we go into things. But let's get both of your answers first.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so personally, I think I have to disagree a little bit with Alan and Michelle in the sense that they're not fully sure how much progress it's made in the past years. Because personally, I feel like, especially in the last 20 years, we've had huge leaps, especially on the technological side, for what privacy has done. Like encryption is pretty much a standard nowadays for when you're communicating with any web server in Web 2. Zero-knowledge proofs have made huge progress, especially in the last couple of years. The only problem, like personally I've seen, is that generally the UX just hasn't quite followed and kept up with more convenient non-private solutions. But that's why I think Web3 is like such an interesting opportunity for privacy, because you don't have these established companies that are non-private or whatever and that people are used to, but rather you can basically build from scratch and educate the people on why privacy is important in a new ecosystem, which is, yeah.
Yeah, and I think everyone's made a lot of really good points, and I just kind of want to bring out something in summary, which is like, what is the end state of privacy, right? Like, what are we building for? I don't think, just as everything on blockchain right now is fully public, well, I mean, 99% of things, right? Unless you're doing like a private blockchain, but 99% of activity is fully public. I don't think we're trying to reach a state where we want everything to be fully private. I think, at least in my perspective, right, I think the goal is to provide that optionality, because at the end of the day, Web3 is not about like, I don't think Web3 is about one or the other extreme. I think it's ultimately about self-sovereignty. And the only way that you can have self-sovereignty, right, your own sort of human right on an individual level, is if you have choice, if you have the optionality. And so I think like what we're doing here, and I think everyone in this space here recognizes, right, like, it's just the user needs to have the choice of being able to have privacy. Right now, there's just absolutely no choice in Web3. And people, I do think we're at a worse state with Web3 than, or we definitely are at a worse state with Web3 than Web2, because in Web2, right, traditional internet, we don't really think too much about our privacy. As Nico mentioned, encryption, of course, it all happens on the back end. And then on top of that, for better or for worse, we have centralized databases. We have centralized entities that, gatekeep our data. And we are led to believe that that sort of gatekeeping process, it comes with trade-offs, such as, like they get to harvest our data and use it for whatever purposes they want. But at the same time, it means that the rest of the internet doesn't have access to it. I think like we're more so conditioned as users in like a traditional internet sense to be thinking about the value proposition more along the lines of, okay, my data is protected, my data is safe. But in Web3, there's no centralized entity that gatekeeps your data. Literally anyone with an internet access has access to your data, right? As Alan mentioned about like analytics companies like Nansen, Chainalysis, right? Like these types of analytics companies are already producing online profiles of you. And it's akin to Facebook's shadow profiles. And for those of you that don't know, it's like Facebook knows who you are, and Facebook knows you better than your best friend knows you, regardless of if you have a Facebook profile or not. And they're just using information on the internet through their touch points that have Facebook accounts to build your profile. So even if you don't have a Facebook profile, if 10 of your friends do, they will know who you are. And Web3 is exactly the same way, except no one needs to have an account. As long as you have a wallet address, like a Nansen and a Chainalysis is there to, do whatever they want with that data. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, right? I think 5 to 10 years from now, if people can exploit data for some sort of lucrative purpose, I don't see why they wouldn't.
Yeah, well, they already are. I mean, I present this point on stage pretty much every time I'm on stage, which is like, if you look at what are actually unicorns in the crypto space, it is the companies, the entities that have managed to do the most with exploiting the public data on chain. And, radical transparency does not necessarily lead to best results. It's just in many cases, kind of just like a lazy design structure. It's like, let's make everything public. It's like, let's just leave the keys in my car. That way, at least everybody has the equal opportunity to steal it. And then, of course, the best car thieves or the fastest car thieves are the ones who get there first and make all the money and sell all the cars. Like MEV being one of the things here, where it's like, people don't understand the consequence of just having all this public by default, but the people who are best positioned to understand the consequence are also profiting massively from it. So there's also a little bit of a principal agent problem. Like the people who might be best positioned to solve it have really no incentive to. They are already exploiting your data. Chainalysis already has a multi-billion-dollar valuation, and they already work with all manner of organizations, not the ones we would choose for them to work with necessarily. So, yep, to your points, this is a problem. Hard to say whether it's getting better or worse, but it's a problem in Web 2. It's a problem in Web 3. As you're describing, it's a problem for pretty much every layer 1. The way we've architected Secret is such that we want it to be less of a problem, right? You start with privacy by default for the applications, and hopefully it's not so disastrous. Sorry, Michelle, are you gonna chime in?
Yeah, I wanted to. I was weighing whether I could jump in here. So I think all of us on this call are interested in privacy. We would probably make a little bit of extra effort to have privacy while transacting. I'm wondering, you guys are building a lot of projects. You spend a lot of time in communities or outside your communities trying to bring people in. What are the barriers that you see that prevent people from jumping in, whether they're users or the applications that build on top of you that then bring users?
That's a wonderful question. Before we answer it, or maybe in the means of answering it, I want to make sure I give Sunanim the opportunity to self-introduce, and maybe you want to take the first crack at that question, the barriers you see to adoption, since we've already started building some solutions.
Yeah, so I'm Simon, also known as Pseudonym, and I'm the lead community manager of NIM, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. Well, actually, that is a great question. I think it sort of ties back into the issue with the general level of education of people of the issue of privacy. So if you look at this space, probably especially the talkers, but this also includes most people who are listening, I would assume, we are acutely familiar and aware of the problem, and we understand it to a very deep like at a very deep level. And I think the sad reality is that this is not even close to be the state of the general public on the issue of privacy. It is a very complex problem. It is not something that is very obvious to understand. And even for those who sort of heard about this problem before, the question of I have nothing to hide, so why would I care about all of these companies having access to all of this data of me? Is still very prevalent. So I think there is this general gap with the importance of the problem and the understanding that exists in the public of that problem. And I think if more people understood the general state of privacy and why it is important, there would be significantly more adoption of these technologies as well. And that also includes Web 2, so not only Web 3.
Cool. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's a good point. I think there's a, and I did this early on in like my world of crypto. Whenever I was, getting into it, I kind of conflated like the difference, between pseudonymous addresses and like in privacy. Like, oh well, this is just an arbitrary account, and then I kind of slowly realized that it is very trivially traceable to your person, right? I think that people just don't really have like a conscious understanding of like just how public the blockchain space is, right? When we think about like, we're kind of like insiders in the space, right? So we understand it very, very well. And even people who aren't, fully insiders but have done things on chain, they generally get it, right? They look at like Etherscan and things like this, but I don't think they really put that together, right? And that understanding only gets worse like when like people aren't actually like full deep in DeFi and things like this, right? So I think we do definitely have an education issue there. But then I also think that we have like a, it hasn't really been built issue. If we look at like the traditional, which is kind of ironic in crypto, but hey, we look at like public ledger crypto, right? There really hasn't been a lot of tools that existed for privacy, right? The biggest one that exists around, right? Perhaps Tornado Cash didn't really have a lot of compostability when it comes to doing like DeFi interactions. Only, recently were things, taken and put together that really existed, Railgun started building in early 21. utilizing Groth16, ZK snarks, Poseidon hash function, all of these things, which, Poseidon was really, really new in early 21, right? ABDK and those guys just barely did the research on it. And so technology to do privacy in public ledger blockchains is really quite difficult, right? And there's been, lots of projects that have had a go at it and, failed, whether it been for gas complications or just the standard of the tech not really existing at the time. I think that we've lost, we've just now gotten to a point where, it is possible to take and do ZK snarks or something like this, apply it against arbitrary smart contract calls like we're doing at Railgun. So I think it's not a new problem, but I think the solutions for, public ledger privacy to exist have finally gotten here. And, I think it'll be really interesting to see, where it goes over the next 18 months. Will it be, people integrating things for, wallet side privacy, smart contracts, smart contract logic or something like this, or, will it be on the DApp side, or will it be a mix of both? I think it's not a zero-sum thing. I think it'll be a mix of all of the above, but I think that, we're finally at a point where the tech is strong enough for people to start building that stuff. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, so personally, I agree with Simon and Alan, especially in the points that unfortunately many users these days just assume because, you have pseudonymous addresses, you open up Etherscan or whatever, Blockchain Explorer, and you just see these random numbers. You just assume, oh, okay, this must be anonymous, which, in our case, we know it isn't. Which then also kind of coincides with the tech, although having made still slower than your typical blockchain transaction these days. For example, in our turn, a way with which wallets can make private transactions, and of course, we use zero-knowledge snarks for that, which is always going to be slower than your standard transaction. And then if your average user isn't educated on, this actually preserves your privacy rather than just being the same as a normal transaction, there isn't really that much motivation to do something that just feels a little bit more annoying to do than your conventional thing. However, I'm of the firm opinion that this is a problem that fortunately is only on the UX and tech side of things and not on the business model side of things. Because when you look at traditional companies and Web2, for example, many of them are dependent on collecting data to actually generate the revenue. Their business model is dependent on it. So that means even if the tech improves, they wouldn't move over to this type of solution just because they wouldn't be able to sustain their business in that way. However, in Web3, as we've seen, tech improves extremely fast and is continuing to improve. So I'm sure we'll get over these UX problems in the near term. And we won't be dependent on having our business model, dependent on data, meaning we will be able to implement them and hopefully make great progress on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Kenny.
So I think it's back to sort of the core of Michelle's question about bringing people on board. I think one thing that we've seen generationally change is, when back in, I guess, before this recent wave, and even, I guess, before, right, when Secret Network was Enigma and the projects before, like Zcash and Monero starting off and Dash, it was very focused on onboarding each individual user. And that meant that the user themselves had to consciously think about, okay, I need privacy for some specific reason. I think what we've shifted towards now, especially, looking at a lot of the projects on the call today, right? We're shifting away from, we're shifting away from making the user think consciously about whether or not they want privacy and then taking extra steps to achieve that privacy, to a level where we're now delivering privacy as a plug and play sort of service, privacy as a service, to the application layer. And so what that means now is that it's no longer, 1,000 individuals each thinking whether or not they want privacy. It's about an application that enables privacy and delivering that to 1,000 users. And I think that really shifts how the Web3 space is thinking about the importance and the onboarding process for users.
No, these are wonderful answers, and Michelle, a wonderful question. I think I would summarize it a bit as well to say, I'm hearing that education is a blocker, that UX may have been a blocker, that the solutions themselves weren't even built, so it was hard to say that people weren't adopting things because they weren't adoptable. There's also this question around privacy as a default knowing how powerful defaults are in everything that gets done and everything that we choose to do or unwillingly or unknowingly choose to do, there's a lot of friction for users when they have to opt into something versus opt out of something. And I think the recent changes, of course, that like Apple, for example, was making that have upset the business models of a great many organizations that relied on all of this behind the scenes data sharing by default, all these business models that relied on that now being completely disrupted. There's a question about, whether we're going to see that trend continue in Web 2. We're going to see whether this trend begins in Web 3, because Web 3, the defaults up to this point have been fully radically transparent by default, and users not having a choice, as we're saying, to opt out of that. Now we're giving them choices on how they can opt in, whether it's at layer 1 or whether they have these DeFi services that are privacy native. I think we all agree we want to make it easier for users to make these choices. And in fact, we don't want it to feel like a choice at all. We want to give them protections without making it onerous for them to give consent or even understand what they're doing.
I have a maybe slightly controversial take, which is I think a lot of projects on this call, you're making privacy a product. You're having people opt into your ecosystem on the premise of privacy. I think a more effective way to spread privacy usage is to make privacy a feature. So on whatever networks, on whatever wallets, on whatever dApps people already transact in, add privacy at that level, so that people don't have to shift, people don't have to move. They do what they do, and then they press a button to add one layer of privacy. That's one way. If I were running a project, that's how I would try to push the usage of privacy.
I've heard this expressed, from everybody, from technologists, from VCs to whomever, right? The reason I fundamentally don't agree, well, I won't say I fully disagree. I would say that it's kind of a spectrum between feature and standalone product, and I fall very far towards the other end of that spectrum relative to your answer. And the reason is that, what is the incentive then for these products to display this feature prominently or urge the user to select it if it's not a default, right? If it's something that the product, like MetaMask, say, is now offering this by default. Okay, so what's the default? Who built the feature? Did MetaMask build the feature? Did they roll their own cryptography? Did they integrate Railgun? If we're offering NFT privacy as a feature in an existing marketplace aggregator, let's say, what does NFT privacy look like? Do they have their own standalone solution that they're going to push on people as a result? What's the incentive for them to offer that?
I think the moment you say push, it doesn't work anymore. I think people have to want it. It's almost like the Intel Inside campaign. If people don't want privacy, and frankly speaking, you just have to accept, all of us have to accept that some people really don't care, which in my experience is the vast majority of people interacting in crypto today, then they don't want it. And if you wish to inspire more people, then that's where wider narratives come in.
I think that's a really dangerous sentiment to say if they don't care, they don't want it, right? The problem is this point exactly about people don't understand what they're giving up. If they don't care, they don't care. They may not know that they should care, but it's not like we're saying something terribly controversial to say privacy is not something that's easy to understand. It's fundamentally something that's usually invisible to the end user, in the ways that it erodes our rights when our privacy is eroded is not very tangible to people. We don't feel it as actively as we could or should. So I don't think that just because people don't opt into privacy or seek it out doesn't mean they don't care or don't want it, especially don't want it. It just means that we haven't made it easy enough for them to understand it or to opt into it. And again, I don't think they should have to opt in at all. I'm not advocating we push privacy down people's throats. I'm advocating that we tell them they're protected by default. Right? We use, you say Intel Inside, we say secured by secret. We give them the confidence to know that what they're doing is private by default. And I guarantee, well, I don't want to guarantee, but I'm like, who's going to then press the button that says, you know what, I actually want to opt out of this privacy? We know that people aren't doing that because Apple changed their default and it destroyed a bunch of businesses that relied on the model where everybody opted in to revealing all their data by default. Now people are constantly refusing to opt out of privacy. And that's why this is happening. We know it's happening. I just don't see, why can't we say that should also happen in Web3?
I think something that is missed here that you guys didn't touch on is universality, which I think generally in Web3 is sort of a problem yet to be figured out. Not so much in Web2, but everything that is universal right now is privacy by default is very far from the reality in anything that is universal right now. So there are many barriers, and obviously to any technology there are going to be barriers and also trade-offs. So that is something that we just need to keep in mind, and I think nobody has illusions about this part. But I think one of the barriers that are very hard to break and achieve mass adoption of anything is the lack of universality. So so let me give you the example of some obscure messaging app that really does provide you with great privacy and multi-layer encryption and all of that stuff. Why would you use it if nobody else is using it? Then there's a huge counter incentive for you to make the jump, and that's also a catch-22 in itself, because obviously if no one's using something, nobody will make the jump to it, and you see the problem. So I think that is something that in general will have to be figured out for Web3 and also Web3 privacy. We need universal solutions that don't tie you into any ecosystem too far, and that can work with multiple solutions. I think that's a pretty important topic when this comes up.
Yep. Well, this might be the perfect time then to pivot into, we wanted to make sure everybody got a little bit of time specifically to talk about their own project and their own solutions. We've been talking kind of at a high level. So for people on stage, let's run about like 60 seconds per person, since you've got this great audience here captive, for about a minute or so. Let them know, how are you? How is your project? How are you personally approaching solving this problem in the Web3 space? It may look more like a feature. It may look more like an entire Layer 1 ecosystem. We'll just go and run through everybody who's on stage, like why you're building your thing the way that you're thinking it should be built, at least true for today. Your roadmap may be long, but like true for today, why are you building what you're building? And we'll start, I think, with, let's start with Kenny, if you're ready to go.
Oh boy, okay.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, no worries. So, so at Manta Network, I think one of the key focuses that we have for building what we're building in terms of privacy and talking about features and choice is around making the user experience as simple as possible from the application side. And so what I mean by that is, when you look at Ethereum, right, there are solutions on top of Ethereum that provide levels of privacy. I think Tornado Cash was mentioned here, but also Tornado Cash was mentioned as there's some limitations in terms of composability. And also because it is, ZKP based, it's very computationally intensive. And so building on top of the infrastructure level makes it a little bit limiting in terms of the performance side, right? And so we wanted to both think about how do we get high performance on the ZKP side, but also deliver it as seamlessly as possible to the user or to the application. And so what we're doing is we are building our own network. And on top of our network, what we're doing is we're enabling smart contracts that are EVM compatible. So any ERC20 token contract, any ERC721 contract can interact with our privacy layer, which is UTXO based. And I guess without getting into too much lingo, what this essentially means is that any applications that are saying, oh, I want to deploy on Ethereum, or I want to deploy on Polygon or somewhere else that is EVM compatible, they can deploy on Manta Network as part of their multi-chain strategy just as easily with no code change on the smart contract level, but also be able to leverage the privacy preservation functionality that we've already built out.
Cool. Let's see. Who else on stage wants to go?
Yeah, so Railgun, we built a privacy-preserving dApp for public ledger blockchains. We use a Groth 16 ZK snark system, which is really, really great. But I guess I'll talk about it in terms of the SDK, right? So we built it for three primary things, right? First and foremost is the wallet side SDK. Basically what this allows is people like MetaMask, Brave Wallet, et cetera, to take and build an incognito mode for their wallet, right? So just like how you could take and hit Control-Shift-N on Google Chrome or Brave, you can take and do the same thing with your wallet, transact privately with a private balance, and apply arbitrary smart contract calls against this. Which, speaking of that part, you can have the SDK for arbitrary smart contract calls, right? So this is taking, and doing whatever you could do with a public balance and being able to apply it to a private balance. And so we actually built the first lighthouse case for that with the 0x API. So you could actually take your private balance and do swaps on Ethereum, BSC, and Polygon, which I think is pretty trick. And we'll be able to take and do that with other dApps, which will be really cool. It's a pretty lightweight SDK, so you can actually take and just do the same arbitrary smart contract calls with a little bit of bookending to deal with a private balance, and that's pretty sick. But then also the last thing that we have on the SDK side, right, is the Railgun Connect. So just like being able to take and connect your MetaMask or whatever, you can take and directly connect a Railgun private balance to the front end of another dApp, right? And so I guess really what we're after in terms of like Railgun is bringing the solution to the space where they're transacting today. I think a lot of people, especially when we talk about like institutions, right? They're very comfortable in taking the risks that they're wanting to take today in the Web3 space, right? That is, transact in the places that they're already transacting. And so being able to take and build, a smart contract logic-based solution that just sits, as infra, if you will, where they're transacting today, that'll allow them to, maintain alpha or something like this, or protect their privacy on an individual level, right? I think is kind of the play that we're after, right? We're going to bring privacy to, where people are transacting, and let them, build the things that they want to build, and do the things that they want to do, but just in a private fashion.
Awesome. Nico or Pseudo, what are you guys building right now?
Yeah, sure, I can go next. Yeah, so Elusiv, basically, we're building on top of Solana instead of making our own chain, our own protocol. And the main reason we decided on that is just because we have the strong thesis that people do care a little bit about privacy, but not enough to the point that they want to, or at least they're very sticky to the solutions that they already know and love. And if you look at Solana, for example, it's one of the blockchains with the most active addresses. So we decided on that one to start out. In addition to it being fast enough for ZK that we can deploy, privacy on there without needing to do a layer 2 or something like that. And then basically the approach we took is we looked at, for example, Tornado Cash was already mentioned, was one of the first ZK solutions built directly on top of a general purpose chain, Ethereum in that case. However, Tornado still suffered from kind of having the problem of not being composable enough, requiring users to go to a separate website, memorize their own, the parameters for the zero-knowledge proof and so on, which just made it too tedious to use. So the approach we kind of took is thinking similar to Railgun, is deciding, okay, people already have their wallets that they know and love. Let's provide the wallets with an SDK with which they can easily integrate, a privacy mode inside of the wallet, and essentially allow users to send private payments as easy as just having a little slider that says, do my transaction privately or do it publicly. And through that, we think, we'll be able to reach a lot more users with privacy than, if we would make, separate website or whatever. So we definitely agree with the SDK approach here.
Cool. Pseudo. And then Michelle, if you want to talk about the project that you are working with currently after, you certainly can.
Sure. I guess it's good that I'm going last, because our project is a bit of an odd one out in terms of Web 2 versus Web 3, because we're agnostic in that sense. So so we have two core technologies. One of them is an infrastructure level solution that is network infrastructure, and it's called a mixnet. It's not a new technology, but we basically took a spin on it. So what our mixnet does, it's an incentivized decentralized mixnet, and it basically shuffles traffic that is carried through it, any network traffic, in a way that makes it impossible for any observer to say who's sending a message to whom, and that includes also details such as timing and other metadata that can reveal who you are and who you're sending traffic to on other solutions such as VPNs or Tor. So each packet is also encrypted in a multi-layer way, and as it travels through our mixnet, each hop basically removes one layer of encryption, and no one mix node on our decentralized network infrastructure knows where each package is going. All they know is that is the next mix node that it needs to travel to. So in essence, this makes the regular ways of mass surveillance that are currently mostly used by governments and also large corporations functionally impossible. So nobody from the outside is capable of knowing whether I'm messaging someone, and if so, who my packages are going to. So in other words, it completely obfuscates the metadata of each package. And the other technology that we have, the other core technology that we have, is a selective disclosure system. It's called Coconut Credentials. And the easiest way to explain this stack is basically through an example. Currently, all of the credentials that we need to show at different places are way too data heavy in terms of what they contain and what they disclose about you. So, for example, if I have to show a COVID vaccine passport, or immunization passport, or whatever it's called in different regions, I will have to tell the person who's scanning it in that QR code, my name, my social security number, and all sorts of other completely irrelevant details are included, which someone who just needs to know that I've been vaccinated against COVID or have tested negative within the past 24 hours or whatever it is, has no business of knowing. So Coconut Credentials is basically making that a reality. With Coconut Credentials, you can perform selective disclosure, which means that I can verify that I've been, for example, vaccinated without the need to share, my mother's maiden name and all of that stuff. So that's NIM in a nutshell for you guys.
Thanks.
I really love what NIM is doing for a few reasons. So I think they're tackling privacy at levels that many privacy projects, including Zcash, are targeting. A lot of us are doing payment privacy, maybe NFT privacy. But I think NIM, sorry, I'm not paid by them to shill, but I think what they're doing is very cool in that they are, for example, targeting network level privacy, which even Zcash, we admit, we don't have that, which is why we do need to fund projects like Tor for people to have true network level privacy. People are using it in certain jurisdictions where if their identity were disclosed, it could be a life-threatening situation. So I think super cool, and I really like the idea of selective disclosure. If I go to the bar, the bouncer doesn't need to know everything. They only need to know my age. They don't need to know my address or anything else on my ID. Anyway, okay. Free shill for NIM over. Personally, I think I truly believe, for me at least, my biggest contribution could be on the narrative front. So we talk about privacy, encryption, etc. I was just reading a bit of the history. When encryption first came about in the 90s, we had the crypto wars, right? There was a fight to protect or allow encryption to happen. At some point, the government proposed something called a Clipper chip. It was something that it was basically a backdoor for the government. So you put it in electronics, you could encrypt to stay private from snoops, etc. But the government would have plain text access to whatever went through that chip. And it was the original cypherpunks who basically vomited all over it. But the way they did that was one of the things they did. A lot of things they did were narrative based, but one of the really funny things they did was, I don't know if any of you remember the Intel Inside kind of campaign where consumers were pushed to ask for the Intel chip inside the computers. So what these cypherpunks did was they printed some stickers and they ran into electronic stores and they stuck stickers on any piece of electronic they could find. And the sticker was basically the Intel logo, but it said Big Brother inside. And I think that allowed consumers to really wake up and understand what was happening. And it led to a point where I think CNN did a poll where 80% of all respondents were against the Clipper chip, which is why today we don't have a backdoor in our electronics. So I think narrative is the most important piece, at least on some fronts in this battle or war.
Absolutely. No, I think everybody here on stage, I mean, this is just us kind of talking with the community here, but people should know this is not just like we invited a bunch of people to a stage and we're doing this and now we forgot about it. And thanks everybody for their time and attention. Like, we are now focusing very hard between projects on how we can advance the narrative within the Web3 space, I think specifically to start, just because in the Web2 space, it's a very complicated issue already. There's great actors like Tor Project, obviously, who are working on some of these issues in a way that is, again, like decentralized, but not necessarily what we would think of as Web3. And we want to be able to work with those projects more directly, but we also want to be able to work with each other more directly to tell these stories, to ensure that this is being covered just as actively as the $100 million fundraise, or as the latest VC funded Layer 1, or this or that or the other, right? Like the narrative behind privacy and the importance specifically of privacy, not privacy just as part of something that's even larger, but privacy itself and making it a focal point is going to force technologists and users to reckon with it on a more regular basis. And if we said that education is a huge piece of the issue, in addition to just actually shipping the tech, then hopefully at least placing the focus on the narrative creates a lot more educational opportunities, leads to the creation of much more refined educational materials and the broader reach of those materials to end users and to developers and hopefully even to regulators, because I still do firmly believe that as regulators look at the Web3 space, and make no mistake, they're looking extremely closely at the Web3 space, there's really two paths this can go. Either regulators decide that they should outlaw privacy outright and try to stop there from being any sort of privacy protections, pseudonymy, anonymity, or any other kind of privacy protections being built in for Web3 users. Or we have the opportunity to educate regulators as to why privacy is a fundamental human right and should be embedded by default in Web3 products. The same way that regulators get very concerned when Facebook or Equifax or whomever leaks all of your data to the world without controls, and then they lead to billions of dollars in fines. Maybe it is a bad thing that in the Web3 space, all of your data is constantly revealed by default to any manner of actors, good, bad, and otherwise. We have the opportunity to tell that story. We may have the opportunity to dent history and impact the future of how these technologies get built, adopted, and regulated. But we have to coordinate on privacy specifically as a leverage point, and do that collectively, not project by project necessarily, not saying this is the only viable privacy solution, just to say privacy is worth solving, we're solving it, come experience it for yourself. We have some minutes until the top of the hour. We can go a little bit over as well because we have so many guests today and there's so many good things here, but this is the time where we're going to bring up anybody who's in the audience who wants to ask a couple quick questions. If any guests have a hard stop at the top of the hour, you're totally free to go. But if you have a question, please raise your hand. I see one hand raised. Happy to add you up here if you've got a question for our speakers. And then anybody else who has a question, I'll add you as well. Please feel free to ask a relevant question about Web3 privacy, ideally.
I just had a question about what you guys think is the only way to live with blockchain analytics companies, because they're going to keep prying at things, and it's pretty much something that's there set in stone. So is there any way that you guys think that they can live within the Web3 space?
I think it's like an arms race, right? If you really sit and think about it, we kind of had the same arms race. Michelle talked about it, from the crypto wars, where people were getting stronger and stronger encryption standards that were developed. And, now there's even the talks around like the quantum resistance capabilities of different encryption standards and whether or not they'll fail, once quantum computing, is a thing. So I think it's just really a standard arms race, right? I think we'll have stronger and stronger encryption methods that are developed over time. Public key encryption is always getting better and better. I always follow the Zcash is a really great example of this, right? If we looked at the original setup for their ZK snark circuits, fast forward it to today, and now they have recursive ZK snarks where they don't even have a setup, right? So these standards will get better and better over time. But I also think, and I'll go on a bit of a limb here, and I'll say that I think there's some things that should be public, right? Especially when it comes to Web3, or at least I feel, right? So whenever I want to interact with something like a smart contract, let's say, I want to be able to take and verify that that smart contract is going to act in a way that I think it should. So if I go and I want to take and swap my tokens, let's say I got some stable coins and I want to swap them for, a new shit coin that I'm a huge fan of. Maybe I've gotten bullish on something here on this call today and I want to swap, right? I should be able to go and verify on chain that this contract is going to do what I tell it to do based on the code there, right? And I should be able to take and, maybe even further verify that, it'll have the liquidity there for me to do it, right? So I think that there has to be like a bit of both, right? I think, privacy by default for users is mission critical. I think it's very, very important, right? Wallet side privacy. I don't want anybody to know how much money I have in my bank account. And I don't want people to know how much money I have in my crypto account. It's none of their business, right? So I think this is definitely important, that privacy by default. But I also believe that there should be some sort of, public, some things that are public to the end user, where they can verify that things are going to act the way that they should. And maybe that's the space for like on-chain analytics. And I think that it's probably, unfortunately, less lucrative for them. So maybe Nansen's subscriptions will get significantly less expensive, because right now all they're doing is taking and selling alpha from funds to, the highest bidder, if you will. They collect, collate, and then sell data of folks like Genesis and, all these other different big funds and how they're trading and, the APYs that they're making. And, I think if privacy does take over, those narratives will erode away. But I think there will be an arms race to get there.
Cool. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle, and then I am adding a couple more questions up here.
Yeah. I think the premise of their argument is that chain analysis is bad and weird and creepy. I mean, they do a level of intelligence and analysis that is very scary, but I don't think they're the enemy, so to speak. They have done a lot of good for the world. The types and the amounts and the dastardliness of the people they have helped apprehend, I think needs to be I don't know if celebrated is the right word, but I think their efforts need to be appreciated. I think you're touching on a bigger problem.
Go ahead.
I think you're touching on a bigger debate that needs to be had, like where to draw the line. What are we as a society willing to trade off? I think that's the analysis.
Yeah, I think it is though, right? I mean, I don't want to give up my individual freedoms just because someone wants to go out. Like, if like multi-lettered agencies want to take out and do due diligence and apply it against the blockchain in order to take and catch criminals, that shouldn't come at like the expense of my personal freedom, right? So I think that there is a bit of a definitely a deep debate to be had there, right? But I think that Chainalysis has done really good things for again these multi-lettered agencies to take and apprehend people who are bad actors, right? But the flip side of that is also the things that they're doing in terms of on-chain espionage, right? So taking and dissecting the trading secrets of various funds and things like this to sell that as like alpha as a service or something like this, right? So okay, great, like they're taking and they're finding criminals, but even when you read deep into the debriefs of like these on-chain analytics, they find that there aren't really a ton of bad actors in the space, and it is still indeed really much easier to launder money in cash. So there's certainly bad actors that exist, but just to sum it up, I just don't think that we should just say, they're there, so we should let Chainalysis have access to all of our financial data because there's a couple of people out there doing bad things.
Let's move and see if we can get a couple more questions here. We had to lose Kenny, who had to drop at the top of the hour. Appreciate Kenny from Manta joining us. We have 0x Dan up here now, if you've got a separate question or related.
Yeah, I've got a question. Thanks for inviting me. So I've been in the space for a couple of years, was spying on Railgun for a very long time, kind of saw it launch. So I'm definitely part of the Railgun community. And the question I have is really around kind of three things, right? Interoperability, composability, and liquidity. And generally what I see with a lot of zero-knowledge solutions is that the premise is that either you have to go to a layer 2 or you have to go to another layer 1. So I'm curious, what does the community generally think about those approaches? Like, is the play that you want to incentivize big players to go to a new environment, or is it or do we think that actually if you deploy these private solutions to where they already are, whether that's Ethereum, whether that's Polygon, that maybe that creates more traction for zero knowledge proofs generally, right? Because when you deploy into another network, now you're breaking composability, or even on a layer 2, right? A private app on a layer 2 that's interacting maybe with a public layer 1, you can't really access the liquidity directly with that layer 1 without a bridge. So super curious to hear kind of what the community's thoughts are, because I've always thought what's so elegant about Railgun is that it is, it deploys on any chain, and then it creates this almost like decentralized dark pool on that network. So then the dApps that are integrated to the SDK start interacting with one another, and then it creates this kind of building block compounding effect.
Right.
So super curious to hear what people think about that.
So let me remark really quickly on this, because I know we take a different approach to a lot of the other projects on stage here. Like, we are a layer 1 and it's private by default. So our approach to solving this question of generalizability versus composability versus all these other things looks a little bit different. But we've made a bet that as a sovereign chain ecosystem, we can optimize for a lot more things than if we were strapped onto a public by default ecosystem where everything still had to settle somehow to a public by default network. And because we've built in the Cosmos ecosystem, pseudonym from NIM had to drop off, but NIM also building in that space and considering some of these interoperability advantages. We actually had a forum thread a couple weeks back posted by the CEO of Secret Labs about this vision of being a sovereign universe, a standalone layer 1 that also is a privacy as a service layer, utilizing cross-chain contract calls and things of that nature. I do believe that that is the future architecture, right? But we're also making a bet simultaneously on things like IBC being the future of bridges in the space, as opposed to these like exploited proof of authority models and multi-sig bridges. Like, that's a bet. It's still a bet. It's not like there's been one determined winner. There's not one determined winner on privacy. There's not even one determined winner on any existing layer 1, right? Like, if you had said in 2018, very credibly, that there would never be another thing like Ethereum, you would have missed every other EVM chain. You would have missed things like Solana getting end user adoption. Like, so we can't say right now anything is over, anything is decided. That's why I'm always hesitant to say, let's go where the users are today. Otherwise, we would have been building everything on top of AOL. And
I totally agree. And I think you're totally right. And I think there's a distinction between creating a layer 1 and a layer 2 versus deploying something that can be deployed onto any layer 1 or layer 2. And I'm totally with you there. I mean, one of my theses is that, look, zero knowledge proofs just and like SNPC, I don't know if anyone knows like Nillion, but like, I think that we're building out these architectures that are going to completely, recontextualize what people even think is settled science in this space. So like, once, is Mina's like recursive ZK snark model based off Ouroboros, like, is that going to be the layer 1 for ZK snarks? Like, maybe not. Maybe there's going to be like a whole other land grab. So I'm totally with you there. I'm not of the opinion that we're in settled science now, but I was just curious because I do think that even outside of that conversation, that's too separate. It's like, do you deploy the thing to all the networks, or do you create a sovereign network? And that's and maybe those two live simultaneously somehow.
They're currently living simultaneously. We're going to find out. That's what everybody on the stage is kind of doing, right? We've heard kind of every alternative here. And we have a project like NIM that's even potentially building a level lower. So really, really great group that we were able to bring to stage today. And hopefully we continue to do these and get these great groups back. We'll probably have the opportunity to do this again from... I know Manta's already offered to host the next one and so on, just to keep the conversation going. So I definitely agree with you. It's unsolved. We have a ton of different solutions coming. I don't see anything up on stage here as competitive solutions. We're all trying to push privacy. We're all trying to figure out what's going to work, and we all win if something does.
Yep, totally agree.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the question. Let's get one more, and then I have a hard stop coming up pretty soon too. So I'm going to bring up Nicholas, who's been waiting patiently for that last question. And apologies to anybody if we didn't get to your question. We will do this again, I promise. We did go over a little bit, so thanks again for your patience. Last thing I'll say, if you've stuck around to this point, remember, we did announce we have a secret NFT for you to claim. It's totally free. The link is in our Twitter. The claim code, however, you will need. The claim code is I love privacy. So if you love privacy, know that we love privacy. Your claim code is I love privacy. You can look through our Twitter, figure out how to do that. You claim a private by default NFT that proves you were here and no one needs to know except you. You'll get a special thank you in the private metadata. But go ahead, Nicholas, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Alan pretty much answered it, but what are you What are you trying to do to block like certain big companies or governments from using these privacy options to remove money from the people there? Like, there needs to be some sort of way to reduce that type of abuse.
Yes, I think your question is around like how do we make sure that it's like permissionless and like and trustless? Is that what I'm gathering?
A bit. Pretty much, it's like it's hard to do it where you need the information of the person to make sure that it's a real person and not some sort of corporation. But at the same time, how do you keep it private?
Oh, is this is more about like questions of identity and how it relates to privacy?
It's more like, let's say Elon Musk opens an account with you guys and tries to launder money out of his company. Public ledger, you can see that money going into his account, but through your system, we wouldn't. So how would you be able to regulate certain things like that?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that like I guess this kind of technology works, right, is that you know the I guess in terms of Railgun anyway, is that it is like a permissionless and decentralized smart contract, right? So the Railgun smart contract was actually voted on by the DAO, which in the early days was really quite funny. We'd all made jokes like in like the core community that like maybe what if the DAO voted no to privacy or something like this, right? We thought that'd be really hilarious, but so everybody took and voted, and it got deployed, and is out there for anybody to take and use, right? Anybody could take and call the Railgun smart contract and use it, right? And so in terms of like taking and stopping people from using privacy solutions, at least is the way that Railgun is structured, is that it is a truly decentralized permissionless system. So anybody can use it, right? And yeah. I mean, so the reality is I don't think we can actually take and stop bad acting, but rather, we'll get to the point where people, can take and be like proof of good acting, right? And so one of the things that I postulate about the future, which we can definitely get into the very long weeds of, is that like we'll get to the point where people can take and prove that they are a good actor. And so, one of the things that you have in Railgun, one of the ZK circuits is a what's known as a viewing key, if you will. And what you can do is you can actually take and generate a zero knowledge proof of your of your deposits in the UTX or Merkle tree that are typically encrypted to the outside user, and reveal those to two people, right? And I kind of akin this to something, maybe if you're in the US, maybe you're familiar with the form 8300 from the IRS. This has to do with very large cash transactions. Actually, not very large, $10,000 and more, or of a suspicious nature, right? And so people actually take and they fill these out whenever there's a transaction that happens with cash, right? So if you took and let's say you go to a car dealership and buy a Honda CRV for $15,000 and you pay with, quarters and dollars and $20 bills and whatnot, right? They'll actually take and fill this form out. It'll go to the IRS. The IRS will take a look at it and they'll say, gee, this is kind of sus. We're going to look into Nicholas. And Nicholas, you'll get like a letter in the mail from the IRS that says, hey, prove to us that you got that cash by good means, right? And then you'll take and you'll show to them, oh, I have a job, or I got it as a gift or whatever. Maybe I had a really good hand at poker or whatever it may have been. I played the slots in Las Vegas and won, right? I got these not by being a Sandy Nation arms dealer or a drug dealer from South America or something like this. And so like when we look at the analogs in like traditional finance, these things exist where people can have like really arguably very private things, cash, and use them to buy goods, a car in this example, and then still also have like regulatory systems and checks and controls around those, right? And I think that we'll have those same things in Web3, and we're building the cryptography circuits to be able to do just that with Railgun. So to I guess sum it up, can we stop bad actors in a permissionless world? No, we can't, right? But we can instead have the ability to prove that we are good actors, and I think that's where the future is going to go, right? People will be able to prove that they aren't up to no good.
Yeah, if I can quickly touch on that as well, like at Elusiv, we actually have a bit of a similar solution to that as well, where we also have the option that people can basically optionally reveal certain UTXOs in our on-chain Merkle tree belong to them, and through that prove that certain private transactions were sent by them. However, one thing we also thought about a lot is oftentimes you might also have the problem that you might be, if you're, for example, let's say Amazon.com tomorrow decides they want to accept cryptocurrency. And through that, then of course they would want to accept private payments, hopefully. But then they have the risk that what if they accept the private payments and they don't know what address on-chain it comes from, and now it comes from someone who stole this money by hacking some other protocol or something like this. And the approach we take there, I think, is a bit similar to what Manta, I believe it was discussed, where the idea is basically that we have so-called certificate issuers that can issue a certificate that you're KYC verified, for example, and then along with your send, you can provide such a certificate and, so to say, show that you are KYC verified. And then on the flip side, for recipients, they can essentially register themselves in the Elusiv program in a way where they say, I only want to receive payments. You should only confirm the payment to me if you're sure that the sender of this has provided a zero-knowledge proof that he owns a certain type of certificate. And through that, I think you can have a pretty good balance of not forcing people to, need to have this permissioned KYC system inside of blockchain, but at the same time providing that option for people who want to interact in such a way.
Awesome. Did that help answer? Because we gotta wrap up in a second, so I hope it was helpful.
Definitely. It just made me think that there could be a solution where it's like fudge, I had the word for it, but it's pretty much the getting a wallet address is not open to everybody, and you have to have someone know you to receive accessibility to that wallet. And so that could create some sort of chain of good trust between users, where they know it's another user that validated that user. I hope I'm making sense here.
Yeah, proof of trust, Dal. Somebody needs to go buy that ENS right now, man. That could be it.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Not to cause a big ENS gold rush here. All right. Well, thanks to all of our speakers who stuck around till the end. Thanks to all our listeners who stuck around to the end. And thank you for all the great questions. We do secret spaces every week. We'll be here again next week. We'll have different guests. This was a very privacy-centric week, but that's because we're a very privacy-centric project and ecosystem. If you made it till the end here, the only thing I'll shill from our side is you might really want to get involved with the secret agents in the secret network community. We do a lot of work to help organize events like this, and we're looking to do more events like this in the future with other privacy projects. If you'd like to help us and you'd like to get the word out more, if you want to contribute to the privacy narrative, we have put a lot of resources in our community behind secret agents. We've had many thousands of people come in and through that program, many of whom have ended up working for projects in our ecosystem or even at the foundation itself. So we would love to meet you. We'd love to onboard you in our ecosystem. We do a lot of research on privacy across the entire Web3 ecosystem. We give you exposure to whomever you need. Please get in touch with us, or just you can go to scrt.network/agents. That will give you a little bit more of an overview of what we do as a community in our ecosystem. We just want to do as much as we can for the cause of privacy across Web3, work more closely with the awesome projects who joined today, including Railgun, including NIM, including Elusiv, including Manta. Please get in touch with us and follow this account. Follow us every week on Secret Spaces. We do have great guests all the time. Thanks again, everyone who joined, everyone who listened, everybody who spoke. It was a pleasure. We will see you next week, next Tuesday, same time, same place for the next Secret Spaces. It was a privilege. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And please enjoy the sounds of my cat.